All right, so let's get into delivering value to a seller to win the listing, win the business. And so I think what a lot of new agents will try and get caught up in are all the tactics and the strategies that they think the seller cares about. I'm going to do a flyer, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. All you're doing is making your offer on what you're going to do to sell the seller's house more complex. When what we have to do in order to create a clear exchange of value is be a lot more simple in our approach, because value is a perception. And the second you start to get super tactical or analytical or specific, you immediately start to commoditize yourself and you start to devalue yourself. And so let me give you an example, all right? And this is what this video is all about today. So the second you start to pull out your little marketing plan, right? You start to pull this little bad boy out. You start going through, all right, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to put it on page 2 of the Real Estate News Weekly magazine. And you start going through all these things that you think the seller cares about. What you're doing is you're creating a world inside of the seller's head that says, okay, you're teaching me to now go and ask the next agent what it is that they're going to do. And if I can find an agent to do what you're doing, but they charge less, then that then tells me who I need to do business with. It's doing the exact opposite that you want it to do. Because in the absence of value, price is the value. So practically speaking, in case maybe you're not following, if you're going to go to a listing presentation and you're going to interview with a seller and you start walking them through all this stuff, and then they meet with another seller that says the same stuff, because this is what all amateur realtors are doing, because they don't know how to deliver value and they don't know how to explain it and they don't know how to play to the perception of value, which we'll get into in a second. Well, all the seller does is they compare the two. This is called a commodity, right? They say, okay, let me look at what you offer. You lay it all out. And what do you offer? You lay it all out. And then whoever charges the least for those things is the winner. That's going against you. And so what we have to do is, when we start to get into the value conversation to position yourself to win the business, we have to create what we call the value gap. And so in other words, we have to create a world that helps the seller accomplish their desired outcome. And we have to position what it is that we do that in a way that puts us right in the middle of that gap. So as an example, let's pretend for a second you wanted to lose 20 pounds, all right? And you go and meet with 2 trainers. And one trainer says, okay, you have to pay me $5,000, and over the next 16 weeks, I'm going to meet you in the gym. We're going to do these workouts. I'm going to give you this supplement plan. You got to follow this. You got to track your macros. You got to get MyFitnessPal. You got to check in with me every single day. And you're like, damn, this is a lot of shit I got to do. And then the other trainer you go and meet and says, I can get you 6-pack. I can get you in great shape. All I have to do, you have to pay me $5,000. I'd be happy to do it. And as soon as you paid him $5,000, he snapped his fingers and voila, you took your shirt off and you were chiseled. Which one has more value to you? And you see, the prospect isn't buying the fitness package. And now bringing this back into real estate, the seller isn't buying the fact that you're what you think they want, which is all this list of all these tasks that you're going to do. We're going to put the lockbox on, and then on day 3 we're going to put the sign in the front yard, and then I'm going to create this new. They don't care about that. They care, does the seller believe, based on your communication, based on your presentation, have you done enough job to transfer influence to the seller from the standpoint, do they believe that by hiring you, that will get them to their desired outcome, which is to sell their home for the maximum amount of money in the right amount of time with the least amount of headaches. And when you start to complicate the process, and it's because you think that that's being valuable, you do the exact opposite because you make it more complex. You stress the seller out. And so when we're delivering value, we call it the value ladder. And what we do is by increasing the seller's certainty that by hiring us, everything is going to be just fine. And so we position that conversation by selling the outcome that they want, not how we're going to get there. Does that make sense? So that's what I want you to focus on when you're in a presentation with the seller and you're meeting with the seller. Instead of getting all nitty gritty and analytical, all right, we want to position it. And I'll give you a practical example. So let's just pretend you're talking about the offer strategy. So instead of getting all nitty gritty and confusing the seller, you can simply say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, one of the things that we're going to do is once we enter the marketplace and we start showing the property and buyers are starting to submit offers, rather than just be reactive and have these buyers and their agents submit in offers, I'm going to position the offer strategy in a way that gets buyers to compete with themselves so that we don't end up competing for the buyer, which results in the buyers giving us the best offer possible, which is exactly what you and I both want. Would you agree? So there would be a practical example of how you are communicating. So the seller says, wow, yeah, that's exactly what we want. I love that, Brandon. Instead of you saying, well, let me turn to page 16. Let me see. And you're pulling this all out. And the seller's like, oh, geez, I don't know. Because it's all based on a perception of how the seller feels, not what you say, not what you're showing them on page 17 of your listing presentation from 1989 that your broker gave you. I hope that makes sense. At the same time, we have to decrease the seller's risk so that it becomes a world where you can create a situation where the seller says, this is a no-brainer. We would love to work with you. So now most of you will probably have questions on, okay, what is the value offer? What does the value delivery sound like? Or what should we be including? You can drop that in the comments and then we can get into some discussion. Based on the comments, based on that discussion, I'll make some more video content that will help to unpack that even more in more greater detail. And certainly if you want help from the standpoint of hiring somebody who could potentially mentor you, guide you through getting more business, I'd be honored to have a conversation. We can walk you through exactly what it is that we do on our team to help agents like you succeed at the highest level, where you're getting 2, 3, 4 listings every single month. We'll have a conversation. You can decide if working with us makes sense or not at this point in your career. So I'll put a link to that beneath this video in the comments, and I will see you guys tomorrow. I appreciate your time and your attention like always.